when you think about hypergrowth, loosely defined as companies that are growing 20+% a year, so you're doubling every 3 years, that's kind of been the Harvest Group story. As we went from startup to growth to now we're in, I would call the scale life stage of a business. There's good and bad.
Good morning, everybody. We're sitting here in the Harvest Group office. You've got myself, Cameron Clark, and then Nick Beyer here as host. And we've got Ross Cully, founder, CEO of Harvest Group. Super excited to dive in this morning, Ross.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Maybe give us a little background first on yourself, where you're from, where you grew up, and then we can kind of dive into Harvest Group.
Yeah, absolutely. I grew up in Springfield, Missouri, so not too far from Northwest Arkansas. My first trip to Northwest Arkansas was to come to Nolan Richardson's basketball camp.
Oh, wow.
Basketball is a big part of my life. And so, back in the 90s, the Hogs were pretty good. We have high hopes this year.
Yep.
So that was my first trip down here. But I went to University of Missouri, or Mizzou, for school and studied business. And just had the fortune of being recruited by Procter & Gamble, a big leader in the consumer packaged goods space, and ended up taking a job with them right out of school and moved down to Northwest Arkansas. So my wife, Kate, and I did the long distance thing for a few years, and then she followed me down to Arkansas, and we've been here roughly the last 20 years, and we have 4 kiddos, and Arkansas has become home.
Did you like the idea of being back in Arkansas? What was the, tell us about that.
Yeah, no plans to be in Arkansas in college. So that's just where the journey took me. But I majored in business management, and at Mizzou, like a lot of colleges, there's certain internships that are coveted and that you're shooting for. And so as I, kind of tracked with some of the folks that were older than me, in the business school, Procter & Gamble's internship was one of those. That folks were shooting for, and so ended up getting that, and lived in Kansas City for a summer, and called on independent grocery stores in rural Western Missouri. And I'll date myself here, but my project was to catch a grocery manager on their smoke break or lunch break, and convince them to give me 4 feet of their cleaning section. And if they did, I would come back a week later and cut the liquid cleaning section down 4 feet and put in this newfangled innovation called Swiffer. So I was in the trenches when Swiffer launched into retail. So so really it was a great place to enter my industry of retail and consumer packaged goods, like grassroots, on the ground, in a store, touching product and shelf, and so had a successful internship, and then got the offer with P&G, and if I remember right, you kind of put down 3 locations that you would like to or prefer to live in, and so Kate was someone I was highly interested in continuing a relationship with, and so Arkansas was the closest to Columbia, where she was going to be, and so that was really the first time that Arkansas kind of made it on the radar.
Map. Yeah, that's funny.
Was that retail experience? I know in your industry that is how things used to start. Maybe it's transitioned a little bit in the last 5 years with so much data at our fingertips.
Yeah.
How formative was that for you? Is that really formative? Is that a high recommendation for someone who might be joining the industry in the next couple of years?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think really, we say at Harvest Group as an integrated commerce agency that's really trying to help brands win at retail in the multiple ways you have to win in retail today. That retail's become trilingual, and I think it was a little bit more one language back then, and it was in store. Today, I think as people enter our industry, it's important to really have a foundational understanding of I think 3 languages. How do you win in store? And so I do think getting out into physical retail stores is important. My kids hate it when they go into a retail store with me because they're like, Dad, don't go down that aisle. Stay with us. Because I'm always a student of the craft. Yeah, seeing new things, checking stuff out. But I think the other two languages that are important today are online. So winning in digital commerce. And then the third is media. In our industry right now, you have these two multi-billion-dollar industries that are kind of colliding: retail or commerce and media. And so I think all three are important today for people to explore and get experience in.
Well, tell us about maybe the time at P&G. What was next? Maybe going into that leading up to Harvest Group here.
Yeah, Procter & Gamble is a great company for me to start with. One of the largest consumer packaged goods companies. Great training ground. Good culture. And so, I had a lot of entry-level positions there in my time there. I started as an analyst, and so learning how to read data and look at competitive, trends and marketplace trends and study the consumer. Had a couple opportunities for selling and then got a big break well before my experience to be a category manager. In our industry, there's this weird role called category management where vendors pay for somebody to go into the retailer and help the retailer do their job in terms of crafting the shelf. And so I was able to do that and see kind of how the sausage is made, so to speak, behind the curtain of Walmart. So inside P&G, sometimes jokingly said that P&G stands for pack and go. And so if you're growing your career at a lot of big CPG companies, you're moving around the country every couple of years. And my wife and I didn't really have vision for that for ourselves. So I began to look and search for what would be next. I would say the other thing is I kind of felt corporate culture was a little bit less inspiring than I'd hoped.
Yeah.
And so as somebody who is, kind of soul searching for what I wanted to do with my life and my career, I was looking for something with a bit more depth and was able to join a local agency here at the time was called North Star that was really pioneering the idea of having a culture that embraces your whole self, including, who you are spiritually and personally, and really, creating a deep culture of relationship. And was able to join that organization and learned a ton, from the culture that those guys built there.
And tell us about the group there. I mean, I know them from growing up here, but just, kind of go into a little bit the group at North Star.
Yeah. So 3 founders, Henry Ho, Rick West, Bill Weitzman, also former P&G guys.
Yeah.
But really, trying to capitalize on helping small brands, win at retail, as well as an emerging trend at the time. This was 20 years ago of shopper marketing. So this idea of creating marketing experiences in store was pretty new at the time. So they were pioneers in that space, and so it was helpful for me to kind of get experience at, hey, here's a big public company.
Yep.
Here's a small local company, and I think I found my home.
In the small side.
In the small side of the marketplace.
And when you say small, how many employees were there to start there? How big was the office? What was the?
Yeah, I don't remember exactly, but I would say like sub 50 for sure. So it was one of those spaces that you knew everybody's name, you knew their kids, like you felt like you could really get to know everybody, which is a sweet experience. If you've never had that working inside a small business, depth of relationship is hard to beat.
Yeah. You're at the birthdays, you're at the weddings.
Yes.
It's pretty awesome. How long was that stint there, and kind of what was that? Was Harvest Group next?
Yeah, Harvest Group was next. Yeah, so it's been about a year there, and that company went through some transitions, and so I kind of found myself at a fork in the road of where do I want to go with my career, and so I'd spent some time, there working with small and mid-sized manufacturers in the consumer packaged goods space. And I really kind of fell in love with that part of the market. You were working with entrepreneurs, the agility of those companies, the speed to innovation was just vastly different from.
There's hustle. Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off. Just for listeners here, small to mid-size, how do you define that? Is there is there revenue? Is there, what's the metric for a small to mid-size?
Yeah, it's a great question. And there's really broad ranges.
Yeah.
I would say today at Harvest Group, we define that as like sub 500 million in revenue.
Okay.
Is small and mid-size manufacturer in the consumer packaged goods space. Sub 25 million, there's a bunch of companies that live at that space as well. And so, working with those companies versus multi-billion-dollar P&G,
Sure.
is just a vastly different experience. And one of the things I felt was, man, when you put points on the board,
it's a big deal.
It's a big deal. Transforms companies, transforms lives. And then when you have an idea, like it can get to market relatively quickly. And so as I was at the fork in the road, I had the opportunity to co-found Harvest Group. And so as I was wrestling with, kind of what to do, I knew I wanted to kind of stay in that side of the market, the small and mid-sized manufacturer market. And I was kind of a reluctant entrepreneur. Kate and I had been married 3 months when we started Harvest Group. So
oh man,
a lot of life change. A lot of wisdom says don't, go do too many things at the same time. And honestly, it was probably more risk averse, at that time. And so I was not one of these people that was just like gung ho, ready to go start my own company. I've dreamed about it forever. It was a lot more, restless praying and searching and seeking wisdom of like, is this what I'm supposed to be doing? I was 26, I've been in my industry, less than 5 years.
Wow.
And so it was uncomfortable for sure.
Yeah. So you say co-founded, give the listeners, what did that dynamic look like?
Yeah.
What did that dynamic look like?
Yeah. So I co-founded the business with two guys that I'd known for several years in my industry, Bill Waitsman and Dan Arnsberger. And so, as I look back, a lot of the companies start with partners and for great reasons. And we were no different. For me, as I mentioned, for being in the industry less than 5 years, having two guys that had done a lot more than I had at that point was pivotal, critical.
Yeah.
And then, you're able to complement each other's strengths.
Yeah.
And so our business story was no different. The three of our combined, complementary skills, 3 sets of hands to share the load, was really important to Harvest Group's founding.
And neither one of them are still with the company, correct?
Yeah. Okay. So my partnership journey, I've gone through different phases. So I've had 2 partners, 1 partner, no partners. It's one of those things that I look back on each of those phases with joy and gratitude, and each one's different. And, you study businesses long enough and you realize that our journey's not uncommon. That oftentimes as businesses grow, the role of different partners change throughout that journey.
Before we kind of dive into more of because how long has it been? 15 years, Harvest Group ish, or
believe it or not, in a month we turn 18.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I know. I look so young, right? Still have all my hair, or not.
I'm right behind you.
Maybe go into first. Hey, just for those who are not in the brokerage business, what does Harvest Group do? Who is the, is the ideal client still that small to mid-sized brand? Like you're saying, what, maybe give the full synopsis here. And then we can kind of talk about maybe the story.
Yeah. Harvest Group's an integrated commerce agency. And so we really come alongside brands that manufacture products and help them accomplish their goals by growing their business at key retailers. So today we work to help them get their products in store and grow their business in store. We help them grow their business online, and we help them deploy their media dollars to grow their business through these retailers. And so we call on Walmart and Sam's Club and Target, Costco and Amazon and Kroger and Harris Teeter. We deploy media across a lot more retailers than that. And we help some of our brands with their social commerce. So helping them sell their products through Instacart on a media basis, Instagram, Meta, TikTok Shop. So that's what we do. And I think, in more layman's terms, when you walk into a grocery store, there's a lot of people trying to get on that shelf. When you go on your app and you start searching for stuff, there's a lot of people trying to get to the top of your screen,
fighting for space.
And we help brands do that. And ultimately, our goal is they typically have a goal to grow to a certain size or grow a certain percentage a year, and we help them get there.
Yeah. And so for those brands, just industry standard, like what's the expectation on how, like when just Harvest Group or insert anyone here in the industry comes into play, what's the expectation on, hey, you can expect growth by then, or here's the general like timeline for results, or is there one?
As soon as possible is their expectation.
Yeah.
So it varies a ton. And so, retail has evolved quite a bit since I got in the game 20 years ago. And so when you think about physical shelf space, I mentioned the retailers we work with, Walmart probably has the most linear square feet, to offer and carry an assortment. Whereas Costco and Sam's Club are limited SKUs. Mm-hmm. And so, boy, the items that those club retailers put in their warehouses, they have to work. Yeah. And so those lead times are longer because those are higher stakes decisions. On the other side of the spectrum, the e-commerce retailers we work with, whether that's Amazon or Walmart Marketplace, there's an endless aisle. Yeah. So you can get your item online tomorrow. Yeah. But yeah, most of the retailers we work with obviously are pretty large companies. Plan their business about a year, 6 months in advance. Okay. And so when we're working on things with our clients, typically we're working out, thinking, not just what's happening today, this week, this month, but what are we going to be doing a year from now?
Okay. That's awesome. Let's just kind of divert back to the very beginning. I want to make sure we tell the whole story, and then kind of maybe what's now, what's coming. So talk back to the very beginning, founding, talk about vision for the company, what that was like. And I mean, an office or, employees, what was that, what did that look like?
We didn't start with an office. And there wasn't really those third place, Starbucks and, WeWork and shared office spaces back then. So we started at our kitchen table, and it was Kate and I's because we didn't have kids. And we, very humble beginnings. I remember going to buy, cell phones and laptops on a credit card and landing our first client, huddled around one of those cell phones on a speakerphone. Yeah, for sure. Big high five. We started, very bootstrap, entrepreneur. And once we hired our first employee that was not a partner, we felt like, okay, we can't really ask him to come to our house to work. A solid Northwest Arkansas story. Basketball is going to be a theme here. I played high school basketball against Carter Clark, who's in the real estate market here in Northwest Arkansas, and his office was behind Rick's Bakery in Fayetteville. Yeah. And he and Brandon Long rented out their storage space to us.
Wow.
So we came in day one, and first we had to clean it out. It had a bunch of deer heads and boxes, and we filled the dumpster getting it ready. But it was a painted cinder block wall room with no windows, and so we nicknamed it the locker room. It reminded us of like a junior high locker room. In the bathroom for the whole office, this is a real estate office that had probably 20 people working in it. The whole bathroom was in our space, so you had this awkwardness of you're working, and then a real estate agent walks in, and the awkward like, hey, how's it going? It's good. And even more awkward when they come out.
Yeah.
So office space was definitely humbling. But we ended up, getting close to an office space in downtown Fayetteville. When we started the business, it was going to be a lifestyle business. We were just hoping to support our families,
Sure.
put food on the table. And we found this kind of old converted house that was on the market, and it ended up that we thought we were going to get it. We wanted to wait till we got our first client before we took on that liability. We got it. We went to make an offer, and it was already under contract, and we were so deflated. And remember, we went to the listing real estate agent's office, which was another old house in downtown Fayetteville. And just to confirm, the sign,
gone.
That was gone. They're like, "Yep, it's gone." Like, dang. And we were looking around. We're like, "Man, this is what we're picturing." As we were walking around their office, and they're like, "Well, we're actually moving out, and we're moving to a more modern space. So we're actually planning to leave all this furniture." So we got a deal done to move into their space on West Avenue, just down from Walton Arts Center, and it was the most weird office situation coming from corporate America, because I could walk to my office. It was an old historic house. I had a mahogany desk with a fireplace in my office.
Yeah.
And
no one cared what you wore.
Shorts and flip flops.
Yeah.
It was a disorienting time, but a lot of fond memories down there. And then one of my partners wisely, observed as we were driving from Fayetteville to X&A to pick up our clients, driving back to Fayetteville to our office, driving up to Bentonville for Walmart meetings, back to Fayetteville to meet in our office, that if we were going to start this business and had no thought of where we personally live,
where would you put it?
Where would we put it? And so we began our commutes, from Fayetteville to Rogers. And so jumped in to the World Trade Center building up here in Rogers. Miss Hunt's been a great landlord for us, and we've been able to grow with her through the years.
And when was that? Give us kind of timeline. Was that a year in, 3 years in? 5?
Yeah. Let's see. I think we moved up to Rogers probably 4 years in.
Okay.
2010-ish.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And at that time, were there already a bunch of offices here in the industry, or were y'all like ahead of that curve?
There was definitely supplier offices up here. But as I look out the window here at Top Golf and the AMP, there wasn't as much going on for sure. Bass Pro, like there's a bunch of stuff going on now here. Traffic's a little bit heavier than when we first came up.
Yeah.
And was there a moment kind of in that, maybe was it when you put the office up here, when you use the word lifestyle business, like, hey, it's just going to support 3 of our families. It's going to be great. When did it feel like something much bigger than that?
Yeah. When we started to hire really talented people, and we got a few years in, and we began to look out and say, gosh, if we're going to retain these talented people, they're going to want to have a career.
Yeah.
And so growing the business, was less about what does that mean for us, and it became more about the culture that we were trying to build and the people that were within it. And then the marketplace, the snowball eventually, as you do a good job, hopefully as a business, it begins to run downhill, roll downhill. And so just the word of mouth that we started to get, an inbound of new business, it kind of took off and really kind of took on a life of its own in terms of the growth of the business.
And that's just clients talking to other clients, small companies talking to other small companies saying, hey, we've had a ton of success with Harvest Group.
Yes. Yeah. When we entered our space 20 years ago, there was a lot of dissatisfaction and well-earned negative stereotypes for service providers to small brands. Some of those stereotypes were, you have a bunch of non-value-added middlemen in the space, over-promise, under-deliver, mile wide, inch deep, not the sharpest knives in the drawer, working, in this agency brokerage space. And a lot of those were well earned for what was going on at the time. Retail 20 years ago, there was a ton of growth going on, and a lot of that growth was happening with the largest brands and the largest manufacturers. So when you think about the consumer today, the consumer is much more interested in new, innovation, healthy, local, small, and 20 years ago, that wasn't the case. The consumer was just buying those big familiar brands. And so, so when we entered the space, it was ripe for disruption. There's a lot of dissatisfaction in white space. And so we really wanted to come in and create something of depth that really flipped all those stereotypes on its head. And so as we did that, just like any business, and you do a good job for somebody, and people want to talk about it with others. And so, so word of mouth was for sure how we grew the business in the early days.
And was it a talent gap you were solving as you came in, or was it, my understanding is whatever sales y'all do, there's some sort of fee associated with that. That's how your company sustains itself. Was the fee too small? And at that time, those companies just weren't able to do good business because there wasn't enough money to do it? Or was it a talent, or just kind of what problem do you think you really solved?
It was multifaceted for sure. So I think there was a bit of talent gap of the employment brand, the company reputations in this space were not something that the most talented people necessarily wanted to be associated with because of those negative stereotypes. Why did those exist? Probably some of it was economic, whether that's charging too little or honestly taking too much profit. Yeah. And so, one of the differentiators for Harvest Group is our client to resource ratio is low compared to our industry. So the service level we offer is on a different level than most of our competitors. And so that means less profit, but it means better service and better results. And so our bet is if we spend more time on our clients and our retail partners' business, if we're doing our job, we'll grow it more. And so I think there was an economic piece to what we were solving. I think another thing was just industry trends, like data analytics was really emerging in our space at the time. And we really leaned into that as a competitive advantage and differentiator that I think some of the folks that were a legacy in our space didn't. And so as we were able to attract young, smart talent and lean into that differentiator and create an economic model that aligned our incentives with our clients, but also gave them the resources they need to make sure that we accomplish their goals, the combination lock just kind of clicked into place.
So it seems like we're starting to kind of get more of that vision for you, at least in the, we'll call it first 4 years. And that vision was just to be better than everybody else in the space by delivering the best product for our client.
Yeah.
And has that vision changed? What is the vision of Harvest now?
Yeah, no, it hasn't. When you say that, I would say what you described is you're describing some of our values, and our values are largely unchanged. We've made one adjustment in 18 years, but our value of excellence is, we want to deliver ever improving results with humility. And so for us, we're always pushing for what do our clients need and how can we deliver better service to them. And so that's unchanged. Our vision has changed. For me, we spent a lot of time with an icon here in Northwest Arkansas, Don Sutterquist, who is the chief operating officer under Sam Walton and known as the keeper of the culture, in the early days of Walmart. And he shared a lot with us at our founding about the importance of mission, vision, values. And so our mission statement really has not changed. That's why you exist. Why'd you leap out and start this place? A vision's where you're headed. And that has changed for us over the years because at times we've accomplished our vision in 18 years. And so we've needed to cast a new one. So today we're looking to transform our industry. And in our industry, we're really straddling two industries, the media industry and the commerce industry. And we think it's still ripe for transformation. There's things in it that are broken. And that's one of my encouragements to entrepreneurs is just when you're launching a company, you're in an industry, is like really pay attention to things that are broken. And can you make them beautiful? Can you turn them around? And if so, that'll be a differentiator. And then we want to proactively serve our clients to help them accomplish their goals. That idea is not new, but it's in our vision. And we've really centered our business around getting our clients to tell us what are their goals and make sure we hit them. And then lastly, we want to enable flourishing in all that we do. And so that's really our promise to the community we operate in, to our employees, to our clients, is we want Harvest Group to really bring good into the world.
So you're starting to scale now. We're 4 or 5 years in. What does the employee kind of dynamic look like at that point? Are we talking 25 employees? Are we talking 30 employees when you kind of get into the space up here in Rogers?
Yeah.
Kind of walk us through those, like when it really feels like growth is starting to compound.
Yeah. It's always felt like that. It's kind of been a hair on fire journey for sure. But I think about that time we were probably around 25, 30 when I kind of imagine that physical office space is kind of how I'm trying to go back and think of that. So yeah, at that stage, I found at every life stage, there's some really sweet, nostalgic, like awesome parts to a company journey. And there's some parts that aren't that great. And some of the dangers of podcasts like this with entrepreneurs is we begin to craft a mythology that like everything is always
Roses.
awesome. But
Yep.
I mean, we were in survival mode.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to like talk about the really of a scaling, young company where, gosh, at times going without a salary as an owner,
Mm-hmm.
to hit payroll, to having deep concentration in one client. That's like, oh my gosh, if we lose that one client, like we're going to have layoffs.
Mm-hmm.
So you're in survival mode, but the sweet parts are definitely at that scale, the relationship, and just the fun and the joy you have of getting to know each other and go through life. And, kind of by definition, when you're launching, you have a little bit more time on your hands.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so whether you take that time to ideate and build and innovate or connect relationally or have a little bit more balance to life, those are some of the sweet times in those early, kind of building startup years. But yeah, we've had pretty consistent growth. We had kind of one season where we expanded our business a couple concentric circles out
Mm-hmm.
and overextended beyond our core, and we ended up selling one of those businesses and shutting another down. But beyond that, we've had pretty consistent growth. And when you think about hyper growth, it's kind of another undefined term in business, but loosely defined as companies that are growing 20+% a year. So you're doubling every 3 years. That's kind of been the Harvest Group story. And so as we went from startup to growth to now we're in, I would call the scale life stage of a business. There's good and bad to all those stages.
And so kind of at this point in the growth, we're still early on, 5 years. Is the partnership, do y'all have different gifts and y'all are deploying your gifts differently? Or is it like you're all kind of huddling around one client, working through this client, or are y'all kind of doing different things? What did that look like back then?
Yeah, in those first 5 years, one of our partners exited to really go do something he was excited about, which is to lead a brand in sales and marketing. And so yes, we had kind of that first 4 years where we had 3 partners, and absolutely, you're dividing, you're conquering. I was doing the back office, accounting and finance. Thankfully, the statute of limitations, I think, has run on those years. Not that we were doing anything intentionally wrong, but you divide and you conquer, and you get to live into those gifts, and you run in the business together, and there's a lot of joy in that I have from those years. So I think once we got past that, and we're in the like 5 to 10 year range, a lot of it's about talent, and so as I mentioned, we had some good inbound interest from brands, and so then it becomes, man, as a service business, our people are our most important asset.
Mm-hmm.
And so can we recruit
values
aligned talent that is really excellent at what they do, which was our goal. We weren't going to compromise on either. We wanted people that deeply held it and lived up to our values, and that were dangerously good at their job. And so recruiting was huge. And I think we hired a head of people and culture, HR, probably earlier in the life cycle than a lot of companies do. I think it's more trendy today to really outsource that, kind of view that as a back office kind of expense. For us, it was a strategic move to hire somebody into that space. And we've, in our history, had 3 amazing leaders, in that role that I can look back and see played pivotal roles in landing key talent.
Mm-hmm. Was it to your experience with, talk about I don't know if you call them the director of people and culture, or whatever the title role is here, and then partners and all that, how people leaving,
Yeah.
how has that experience been for you? And is that now like an exciting thing for you, or is it terrifying, or there's just like a lot of different seasons you've gone through,
I know. I've lived a lot of entrepreneurial life. It's been an evolution on people leaving in terms of how I feel about it, how I view it. And I really have come to believe that how people join and leave an organization is an indication of cultural health.
Mm-hmm.
And so if people can't join your company well, then you're probably a clique. I've heard it said, and if people can't leave your organization well, then you're probably a cult.
Yeah.
And so for me in the early days, there's a tinge when someone leaves your company that you take it personally. If you have high ownership mindset, you care about people, and you truly have a vision for their career, and you truly believe that where you're headed as a company is a great place and positive, it's hard to have people leave. But I've come to really embrace something that we talk about in our culture of holding people with an open hand, and really celebrating them as a person on their personal journey. And so I've been in cultures where we put a lot of time and talent into our workplace, and when we have a chapter that ends at that workplace, if that's not recognized, if that's not celebrated, even if we're not happy that they're leaving, like that's just kind of wrong in my opinion. And so we celebrate people. We let them, kind of opt into what that looks like for them. For some, it's like, hey, let's go to lunch, with my small team, or go to a happy hour and invite folks to drop by. I would say the more unique aspect of our departures that the brave souls opt into is what we call a roast and toast. And so we'll gather, and people, it's an open mic, so that can be dangerous. And people step up, and usually it's a great combination of toasting, the great work that they did, how they contribute to our culture, but also having a little fun and roasting them. So.
That's real life right there.
We have a few folks that joke that tradition keeps them at Harvest Group.
That's pretty amazing. My personal experience, I had a stint at Be Unlimited. It feels like a lot of the early there's like a couple of those years, it was just like so much energy and just excitement, and it's fun. It's fun.
It is. It is. Yeah, for sure.
And so, I feel like for the last, we'll call it 10 minutes, we've been talking about culture, and we're talking about early formation of Harvest. So that was integral for you. It still is integral for you. And so I think now, in the business world, culture is a sexy thing. We're talking almost 18 years ago. I don't know that it was, right? You got the quote, culture eats strategy for breakfast, but talk a little bit about your why behind that. And talk about how it's sustained for the last 18 years as we'll call it the pinnacle of importance based on our conversation so far.
Yeah, I don't think that's an overstatement. When I think about our company, I think it is pinnacle of importance. When I meet with every new hire, and we ask our team on a regular basis, check in with them on how they're feeling about working at Harvest Group. In both instances, people and culture is the top thing of why people are here, why they've come, and why they stay. My personal why is really tied to my faith. So I'm a follower of Jesus. I hope that impacts who I am and how I operate in all spheres of life, including as a business owner and in the marketplace. And so for me, as I look at Jesus's teachings, there's some lessons there that really have influenced how I want to build a culture at Harvest Group. And so I see him as a person who is welcoming to all, as a person who was deeply excellent at his work, that had the highest moral standards for integrity, that embraced risk and was provocative at times and innovative and challenged the status quo, who's focused on long-term legacy, who saw people, made people feel like they belonged. And so when I look at, just some of those, for me, like core truths and principles, for who I'm personally following and trying and aspiring to be more like, that's certainly been why I've tried to craft our culture the way it is. And my take on that is that that's good news for everybody,
Mm-hmm.
no matter where they are spiritually, how they would identify themselves as a person of faith or as a person that's not of faith. And I think that that's one of the things that I've been proud of, is just the culture that we've built is one that has been received well by a variety of folks. And we have a diverse workforce here at Harvest Group that all would consider this place home and a good place to work. So, how has that been maintained through the years? As you go through different company life stages and sizes, certainly the founder has a key role in setting culture. And so the traditions that we set, the things that we focus on, the things that we reward, what I talk about are all things that impact culture in the early years. And then as you grow and scale, the culture becomes a bit more set. And the founder, I think, takes a little bit less of a direct role, and it really, that baton gets passed to the rest of the organization. And so, particularly in a hypergrowth organization where sometimes, 50%, in some years, 50% of our people have been here less than 2 years, their main experience and teacher of what is the culture of our company is not me. It's their team, it's their manager. Mm-hmm. And so, there comes this shift where the culture is perpetuated by others. And I have been incredibly grateful that we've had a lot of people that have stayed at Harvest Group for a long time that have been able to share, that responsibility, that joy of carrying that culture forward and perpetuating it and making sure that it stays consistent for folks that are joining our organization today.
Before we kind of move on to where the business is at now, and we'd love for you to share, and some of those figures about growth have incredibly impressive. Were there any, as you reflect on kind of those early years, were there any mistakes that you'd share, right? I think we talked a little bit about that earlier. You get on these podcasts and it's sexy. Our business is doubling every 3 years. But like, what were some of the mistakes that you look back on and you're like, man, I should have done this differently. I should have handled this differently. I wish I could have had that back.
Yeah, many, many. For sure. And yeah, I think some of the ones that stick out in the early years are related to people. I mentioned like people are our most important asset. And I can think of a few instances where I don't think I'd matured in my management to a place to know when do you step in as a manager and intervene versus be empowering and delegate. When do you help somebody that needs help, but needs help from somebody outside of themselves? And so there were instances, as a small business, you wear a lot of hats. People are, it's a lean organization. And so I think there's a tendency towards overwork when you're scaling a business in that survival startup mode. And there were instances where people ended up in burnout and in that overwork mode where they were not flourishing. Mm-hmm. And I had over delegated and over empowered to trust, people to kind of be their own regulator of that. But we typically hire people that are pretty driven and focused on excellence and service. And so, that issue still exists today, where when you have somebody who has a high ownership mindset working towards excellence, as a manager, I think I made some mistakes early on of not stepping in to help, to set a boundary, to, the analogy I've used in the past is, if you have a great competitive pitcher, that's, needs to come out, or they're going to throw their arm out, they're still pretty ticked off at the manager when he comes out and asks for the ball. And those are the type of people I want to work with.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But if the manager doesn't come out and grab the ball, they're going to throw their arm out.
Yeah.
Because they have that kind of a drive. And I hadn't learned that in the early days. So some of our cultural promise and my aspiration was not lived out in the early days, because I hadn't learned that lesson, and hadn't found the courage to do that with some of our early teammates. I think again, when you're in that survival, startup mode, financially, like, every dollar matters, every client matters. And so there were some instances where we had clients that were not values aligned. They didn't treat our people well. And I lacked the courage to step in and say, like, hey, like, this has got to change. We're not going to work with you. And so again, that impacted some people in ways that their experience was not one of flourishing. That relationship with some of those clients was not representative of the values that we said we were going to live by. And it was because we were in that financial survival mode. And again, as a leader, I didn't step in, as fast as I could have to do that. Thankfully, one of the stories that we talk about in our culture, in one instance, we did step up as leaders, and we had our largest client at the time was not living up to our values, and we ended up resigning them. Wow. And one of the lessons I mentioned Don Soderquist earlier that he taught me is, he said, Ross, your values are your values if you have stories to tell of when you've lived them out, and especially if they've cost you something.
Wow.
And so that decision to resign that client resulted in owners not getting paid for months. We normally had a year-end kind of offsite celebration where we'd go, to a fun place, and it was a form of reward and celebration. We ended up having a potluck at the office that year, and so that decision cost us something, but it did solidify, for our culture, like, hey, we are going to be a place of integrity. We're going to do the right thing. And I share that to celebrate, but as a leader, I also reflect, man, I should have done that earlier than we did. And so, so those are some of the mistakes we made. I mentioned expanding beyond our core from a concentric circle standpoint. We got a little bit over our skis in a couple of businesses in the first 5 to 7 years. That as an entrepreneur, sometimes a visionary, you see opportunity and you can't help but chase it.
Yeah.
And
you're a doer.
Yeah. So that's another probably area of mistakes that I've made.
Let's kind of bring it up to now. We'll say last 3 to 5 years at Harvest Group. Could you just kind of walk us through the economics of the business, whether it's revenue or growth keggers, or how many employees you have, just to kind of set the scene of like where Harvest is at now?
Yeah, we're a long way from the kitchen table with 3 people. So we're over 300 employees at this point. And when I think about the last 3 to 5 years, it's definitely been one of continued growth. And so some of the things that have changed for us is we've expanded to work with more retailers, and we've expanded the services that we provide. I mentioned how our industry has changed. And so as my coach, Steve Graves, says, you can't manage the market, can't control the market. You got to navigate it. And so the retail market has changed a ton. We've gone from, as I mentioned, 10 years ago, largely shopping in stores to, now in some categories, over a quarter of the sales are happening online. You have this convergence of media that's happening with commerce. You have remote work, hybrid work that's happened post-COVID. And then in our space, there's some consolidation happening both at the retailer level. There's a proposed merger with Kroger and Albertsons, which would create a new, top 3 retailer in the U.S. There's consolidation in our space of service providers like us that are acquiring or being acquired. You have really, I would say, an advent of technology coming into our space over the last 10 to 15 years. And so we've had to evolve to really be a tech company that has a tech-enabled service. And so if you're not involved in building or using technology and providing a service, in the space that I'm in, then you're behind.
Mm.
And so when I think about now and certainly in the future, you throw in artificial intelligence on top
Yeah.
of that,
Mm-hmm.
there's just a lot of changes. And so I'd say the last 3 to 5 years have been us really trying to navigate all those shifts in our market to position ourselves to continue to be what we want to be, which is somebody who's transforming our industry, not just kind of along for the ride.
In those growth keggers, is it still upwards of 20%? Like, is that still the growth you're seeing? I mean, and I know the last 5 years, it feels like anecdotally, Cameron and I were talking. It's like we know so many people who work here now.
Yeah, we are continuing on that growth journey for sure. So so for us, again, a lot of that is dictated by the inbound, interest that we have in our service and the work that we're doing for our clients to grow their business. And if we're taking care of our existing clients, then the rest will kind of take care of itself.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of been our growth journey for sure. And so it's managing that growth it creates a different set of problems.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll take those problems over the opposite, but things start to break.
Yeah.
And so, things that you put in place 3 years ago, all of a sudden don't work anymore. Or the way that you did that 2 years ago, all of a sudden that doesn't work anymore. Or, I mentioned hybrid and hiring a lot of new people, as you mentioned. How do you integrate them into your culture? How do you train them? And so we find ourselves assuming that everybody knows this, and half the people don't know this.
Mm-hmm.
And so systems and process and some of those things that you can use to your advantage to help do things at scale are becoming a much more important part of running the business.
And how has that impacted you? I know you touched on it a little bit earlier, your kind of transformation and your leadership journey. What does your role look like now as an owner, as a CEO? How does it look different now than it did a few years ago?
Yeah, it has changed. And I think that's another important entrepreneurial founder learning. Bain Consulting has a great content on this called Founders Mentality. But as you scale a business, the unscalable founder can be a hindrance to a business. And so oftentimes those of us that are founders of business, we're maybe the right people for those early stages, but then the business grows and scales, and what the company needs from that leader has to change. And some founders love the early stages of running a business, and so they exit and go back and do that again. Others try to evolve and change, with those needs, and others maybe don't make that change, and they're actually the hindrance to their business.
Yeah.
And so I would say I've tried to be a student of that reality and change and evolve my leadership. And so a lot of that change I would describe as really working through my team. And so, certainly in the early days, founders' fingerprints and hands are at everything. And from the delivery of the work to, as I mentioned, accounting and payroll. And so there's a lot going on where you're directly involved. And I think a big evolution is being willing to step out of that and empower and train a team. And so that's a big part of my job is making sure that, as I work with our management team, that I'm pouring into them, I'm removing barriers, I'm getting them on the same page, I'm setting a clear vision, we're wrestling through strategy that's clear so that they can go do their job. And so there's some mourning in that, some sadness, when you step away from work you enjoy or that you think you were good at, and say that's somebody else's job now.
Yeah.
But it's also incredibly rewarding too when you see people step up and do the job, and if you're honest, do it better than you would have done it. So working through a team is a big part of what I do. Setting culture, continuing to make sure that I understand that my words matter and what I talk about and emphasize does have an impact, more of an impact than I want it to be. And then setting direction, setting resources, setting risk. Those are some of the things, that I'm focused on.
I think you did a good job of capturing. I thought it was really interesting. You're either a student you're a hindrance to the business, or you exit the business. Those kind of three, we'll call it, things evolve as a founder. And so I think you did a great job of sharing your why, or your how, but could you tell us a little bit about your why? Like, something has to be driving you to be a student, to keep evolving, right? I mean, I think a lot of people looking in, it's like, if you have an exit opportunity, why not exit? So what's the why behind that?
Yeah. I do think that some people start a business and that's actually their end goal.
Mm-hmm.
It's a financial peak or a finish line, to cross, to exit a business. For me, that wasn't what I started the business focused on. Obviously, I've been in it 18 years. Most people that are after exits are a little bit shorter timeline.
Yeah.
So part of the reward for me is I think that work has an impact on all of us in terms of shaping our culture, our character, who we are. It's incredibly rewarding, the relationships that we get to have. And so for me, there's some reward, there's some value in being in the business and in the role that I'm in that's hard to quantify. At the same time, for me, I play a team sport, and though everybody at Harvest Group isn't on the cap table, like for me, I take seriously the stewardship that I have of this place, and the clients that have entrusted their business to us, and so. For me, I think sometimes when I look at transactions and exits, I see a lot of brokenness, to use that term again. And so some of that is on the entrepreneur's shoulders. Some of that's on, the purchaser and what happens afterwards. But there can be a lot of shrapnel, to those. And so, and then, the other thing for sure is for us is we have a compelling vision. And so, you got to have something in front of you that you're excited to go get. And for us, we just have so many more ways and places that we think we can serve our clients. And when I think about, the number of people that are at Harvest Group, hopefully at a place of work that's helping them flourish, that's motivating to me. That hopefully, there's one more person, that gets to work at a place that I think's a great place to work, and hopefully remain so.
Well, you'd have to be an idiot to not think you'll have had so many opportunities to sell. There's a real why behind it.
I feel like you've talked a lot about your leadership team over the past 5 minutes, and that kind of seems to be where you're imparting a lot of trust and a lot of your time. As you kind of reflect on the last few years, have there been some big investments made there, whether it's financially or just headcount or even the amount of trust that you're placing in them? Is that, would you say, if you had to draw it on a board of key investments I made in the last 3 years, is that one of them?
Adding key leaders?
Just your leadership team in general.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. What you find as you scale a business is that each business has certain bottlenecks, and so for some, that bottleneck could be capital, if it's a real capital intensive business. For others, it could be like a physical asset, like there's no undeveloped land here. In my business, as we service clients with expertise and a tech enabled service, the people that help deliver that service are one of our biggest assets. And so as you scale, you've got to expand your leadership as a company. And that's another skill set. It's another thing to learn how to do. And at Harvest Grove, that has been a focus that we've been paying close attention to because when you're in a hyper growth kind of mode, as I mentioned, you add people so quickly that you have to have somebody there that is guiding them, that knows the culture, that knows the service offering. And so if you're not investing in leadership, you can quickly get yourself in trouble where you have new people leading new people leading new people. And all of a sudden that experience, that customer client experience begins to erode and look and feel different than the brand promise and the values that you've held out in the marketplace. So absolutely. And that's something that I take great joy in, is that we're a place that people have a career path, an opportunity to grow in responsibility and sharpening their leadership skills, growing in financial opportunities. And so as we've invested in those leaders, as we've scaled, it's not easy, but it's important and necessary. And it also is a labor of joy.
Talking about the now, one of the things I wanted to talk about is it's cool on LinkedIn. There's multiple clients of yours that like talk really highly about you. I mean, Sean Riley with Dude Wipes, he's all over LinkedIn. And he's pumping Harvest Group, and he talks about Northwest Arkansas, and talk about, can you give a couple client stories? Or talk about, he's pretty public on that end there. Not that you have to talk about revenue or anything like that, but just the journey of a brand and coming alongside.
Yeah, Sean's a great one. Sean's a great story. But yeah, we've got a lot of stories, and they come in all shapes and sizes. So we have brands that are launching, like Dude and Sean's stories. We have brands that come to us and they're in that hyper growth mode and things are breaking and they need somebody to come in and help that has a bit more infrastructure to help keep them on their growth journey. We have brands that come to us that maybe are looking to turn around the trajectory of the business. But yeah, Sean's a great one in that category of a brand that's launching. So yeah, if you're not familiar with Dude Wipes, it's a great business that sells wipes that can help you in the bathroom after the workout, when you're out in the deer blind, a variety of usages. But a Shark Tank alum that Mark Cuban invested in, and when we reached out to Sean, they were very, very small and had not made their way into big retail yet, and so we were able to really help come alongside them as they went on their journey. And so now, you can find them in all the major retailers, that we work with. And so we've been able to, to kind of service them and go with them on that journey. And so, yeah, like in any business, and we're a service business. So think of, a service that you are a customer of, be that a restaurant, a hotel, your accountant, somebody who does something around your house. When you have a great experience, what do? You
talk about it.
You go talk about it. And sometimes you can't help but talk about it. Depending on your personality. I have a coworker here, Mark, that when he gets excited about something, like he's going to be telling some people about it, and he won't stop until you've dove in.
We know now. We know.
Yes. So yeah, that's a benefit of our service, is that when we do a great job for folks like Sean, sometimes they're generous and gracious enough to tell people about the experience they've had.
Obviously, the outcome's rewarding, right? Seeing them when you walk in all these stores, super rewarding. But how much of the journey is rewarding, right? Because I think everybody listening to this, we can see the outcome. We don't see the journey. So talk a little bit about that, especially on the client front.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point that I haven't always had right in my entrepreneurial journey. Sometimes, certainly early on, it was like, I can't wait till we get here. And life will be so much easier. The ride will be so much smoother when we get here. And then I got there, and you find like there's still turbulence there. There's still problems. It's not perfect. And so, kind of what I've learned that I mentioned earlier is a phrase we use in our culture of just taking joy in the journey. And so, boy, when it's hard and you're in survival mode and you're grinding and, you're up late, like trying to figure out this presentation or this pricing, issue that you're working through, like take joy that like, here we are in the trenches working hard. And then when you get there and you get the distribution and there's, this issue or that, there's going to be issues, but just taking joy. And I think in life, one of the things that I realized is comparison's the thief of joy. And we always compare up.
Mm-hmm.
We never compare down. And so something that I try to regularly do is remind myself to look back, i.e. down, and take gratitude, but not lose the opportunity to find gratitude and joy no matter where I am, because there we'll have joy. It'll also have issues. And so don't wait, for the perfect time to reflect back with joy. And so, yeah, absolutely. The journey is a big part of it, and so, in my life, I've really enjoyed hiking and mountaineering and climbing mountains, and being on the peak is fun. We don't live on the peak. You can't live on the peak, and your time there is relative to the work it took to get there short. And so, some of that gratitude when you reach a goal is to look back and see, oh, wow, look how far we've come. And if you wait to celebrate, then I think there's a missed opportunity there.
Well, that kind of gets us into, one of the things we're asking every guest here is, how do you define success? And how do you find success, Ross?
Yeah, it is something I'm reflecting on a lot right now as my wife and I, enter new seasons of our personal life with our family. But I think if I had to boil it down, I want to live a holistic life. And we talk about this as a leadership team of sometimes in the pursuit of success, and the people that are like really at the top of their game oftentimes sacrifice major parts of their life. So you think about the extremes of people that are like just the greatest of all time, and how disciplined they have to be, and how focused and how much time they give to one area of life, that oftentimes there's other areas that are underdeveloped in who they are. The people that I respect the most and that I want to aspire to be are people that have a whole life, a holistic life. And so for me, success looks like, man, I want to do a phenomenal job at Harvest Group. I want to continue to grow. I want to do my work with excellence. I want this place to be a place that does awesome work for clients and has a phenomenal culture. I also, in my priority and in my values, want to be an amazing husband and a great dad and somebody who's there for my friends, and not my friends that are connected to my work, but my friends that have nothing to do with work. I want to be involved in my church and my community. I want to be somebody who's generous, not just in writing a check, but with my eyes and my hands. I want to be somebody who is healthy mentally and physically. And so I think I found that that's really hard. And I've learned to give myself some grace that like a balloon, sometimes an area gets squeezed. And so there's some tension in that vision of success. And something that we've talked about in our company recently is tensions. Sometimes we try to solve tensions and kind of get it right forever. But tensions, I think it's Andy Stanley that says, are to be managed and monitored. They're going to exist.
Yeah.
So the idea of it going away, that's the wrong vision. It's, man, I need to monitor all those things. And if I've been traveling too much for work, like I need to reinvest at home. And then it's once you monitor and pay attention to stuff, then you can manage it into your vision of success. But yeah, that's how I describe it for me.
So good.
I have so much respect for you and just Harvest Group as a whole. It is an unbelievable company. And, I think there's a whole lot we didn't even initially get to tap into. I mean, you have offices across the world, and there's y'all's reach as far. Kind of last question here for you. This podcast is a Northwest Arkansas podcast.
Yeah.
why Harvest Group in Northwest Arkansas? And
Yeah. Well, first, just want to say thanks for the encouragement. There's a lot of people that have created whatever positive character or reputation Harvest Group has, and so I'd have to recognize my wife, who has been incredibly supportive and patient over the last 18 years. And I play a team sport, so past teammates, past partners, current teammates. There's a lot of people that are part of that. But thank you for that encouragement. Why Northwest Arkansas? We started supporting Walmart and Sam's Club, which are headquartered here. So as a lot of entrepreneurial businesses will recognize, this area has a couple big tentpole companies, no bigger than Walmart, that have had an impact on this business, and their ripple effects, go far beyond their walls. And we're an example of that. We are a healthy, bootstrapped entrepreneurial local business that services them and their customers and their suppliers. And so that's why we're here. We're proud to be here, proud to be an Arkansas company. And we find it to be an incredible place to live and to recruit people to live with an amazing talent pool, both folks that are in our industry and experienced, as well as students coming out of local universities. And we believe that we couldn't be in a better place, to support the growth vision that we have in the future. So thank you guys for shining a light on entrepreneurs here in the area. And there's a lot of great stories to be told.
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming on, Ross. I think as we reflect on like some of the biggest things we heard you talk about through this past hour, it's values seem to be a common thread. And it's personally, that's where it starts, your values, and then it has transcended into the values of the organization. And I think as we think through leaders we respect, ones who don't waver and who hold fast to their values, seem to be the best leaders. And so hearing you talk about, I think you said one time in the last 18 years, y'all have changed your values. So there's a clear avenue if something needed to change for it to change, but you have held fast to the things you find true. And thank you for doing that. And it's clearly made an impact on the culture here in our community in Northwest Arkansas. So thank you for that. The second thing is people seem to be your biggest focus and have been from the inception, right? Whether we're talking partnerships, whether we're talking new employees that you've brought on, but I just can't imagine this multiplication effect of, okay, we just brought on 20 employees, we're bringing on 20 more, and how hard that would be to manage. But that seems to be your biggest focus, is caring for those employees, making them feel welcome, making them feel valued, and making sure that this is the best place for them to thrive in the workplace. And so thank you for doing that. And then the last piece is you seem to have this sense of purpose about you. And I think it kind of goes back to that first piece of values. And your values have clearly defined your purpose. But kind of hearing you say, we talked about an exit a little bit, and just things that the why you've been here, why you've been so passionate about Harvest Group. And there's this deep purpose that, and I wrote down, work shapes who you are. And you believe that in some way. And so I just find that I think we find that really inspiring, that there's a deep purpose in what we do. And it's to grow our character, and hopefully that we grow the character of the people around us. And I think you've done a great job of modeling that. So thank you for that. But Ross, Cully, Harvest Group, thanks for coming on. We were so honored by this time and learned so much. And I know that our listeners will too. So how can people find you or reach out?
Yeah, harvestgroup.com. Check us out there. And appreciate your encouragement. It's good accountability for me to keep going. Those are some big words to live it into, but entrepreneurship is a full contact sport. And so I think the biggest encouragement, I have for myself and others is just to keep going and get up every day and hopefully do a little bit better.